"That medication is not allowed on this aircraft," Heather Collins snapped, loud enough for every passenger in the first-class cabin to hear. 11-year-old Jordan Reed froze with his inhaler halfway to his mouth. His eyes widened, not from guilt, but from the sudden shock of being treated like he had done something wrong. Beside him, his father, Marcus Reed, slowly turned away from the window. He had been reviewing notes on his tablet while the aircraft remained parked at the gate in Atlanta, preparing for a 3-hour flight to Chicago. Now his attention narrowed to the white flight attendant standing over his son. Heather's expression was hard, certain, and already impatient. "Put it away," she ordered. Jordan lowered the inhaler slightly. "I need it when my chest feels tight," he said. His voice was quiet, careful, the way children speak when they sense that an adult has already decided not to believe them. Heather reached toward the tray table and picked up the small clear medication pouch. Inside were the inhaler, a spacer, a printed prescription label, and an emergency instruction card. She held the pouch between 2 fingers as if it were suspicious. "Passengers cannot use unverified devices during boarding," she said. Marcus closed his tablet. "It is a prescribed rescue inhaler. His name is on the label." Heather did not look at the label. Instead, she glanced at Jordan's hoodie, then at Marcus's simple gray sweater and dark jeans. "People bring all kinds of things on planes and claim they are medical," she replied. "I am responsible for keeping this cabin safe." Marcus stood, calm but alert. At 45, he had learned that panic rarely protected anyone. Precision did. "Then verify it," he said. "The prescription is attached, and his physician's letter is in the front pocket." Heather opened the pouch, ignored the paperwork, and placed it on the service cart behind her. "It will remain with the crew until we land." Jordan looked up at his father. "Dad, I might need it." The fear in his voice changed the air. Marcus stepped into the aisle, keeping his tone level. "Return my son's medication." Several passengers turned toward them. A woman across the aisle lowered her magazine. A man in the row behind removed one earbud. Heather crossed her arms. "Sir, do not make this difficult." Marcus looked at the medication pouch sitting barely 6 feet away. "You took prescribed emergency medication from a child without reading the label, without checking the documentation, and without asking about his condition. You made it difficult the moment you decided suspicion mattered more than facts." Heather's face tightened. "If you continue challenging crew instructions, I will call the lead attendant." "Call whoever you need," Marcus said. "But my son keeps his inhaler." Jordan drew a slow breath, trying to stay composed, but Marcus noticed the slight tension in his shoulders. He knew that sign. He had seen it in emergency rooms, school offices, and one terrifying night when Jordan was 7 and could not finish a sentence without stopping for air. Heather reached for the cart handle. "This conversation is over." Marcus stepped no closer, but his voice stopped her. "No," he said. "It is now documented." Heather turned back. "What does that mean?" Marcus took out his phone and unlocked it with one measured movement. "It means you just confiscated a black child's medication, ignored valid medical paperwork, and assumed his father would stay quiet." Marcus did not raise the phone to record. He opened the notes application and typed the time, the flight number, Heather Collins's name tag, and the exact words she had used. Jordan watched him, trying to match his father's calm, but his fingers curled against the edge of the armrest. The aircraft was still at the gate, the cabin door open, the low hum of boarding continuing behind them as though nothing important had happened. Heather looked at the phone and gave a dismissive shake of her head. "You can type whatever you want. The medication stays with the crew." Marcus glanced toward the clear pouch on the service cart. "My son's rescue inhaler is not luggage. It is emergency medical equipment." "It is an unverified device," Heather replied. "You keep calling it unverified because you refuse to verify it." Her expression hardened. "Sir, I am done arguing." She turned toward the galley and called for the lead attendant. Jordan leaned closer to his father. "I am okay right now," he whispered. Marcus heard the effort behind the words. He placed one hand gently on Jordan's shoulder. Tell me if anything changes. Do not try to be brave for me. Jordan nodded. A moment later, lead attendant Paul Mercer stepped into the aisle. He was a white man in his early 50s with a practiced smile and a voice designed to sound calm even when it was not. Heather spoke first. This passenger brought an unapproved medical device on board and is refusing crew instructions. Marcus looked directly at Paul. My son has severe asthma. The inhaler is prescribed, labeled, and supported by a physician's letter. She took it without reading any of the documents. Paul glanced at Jordan, then at the pouch. May I see the paperwork? It is inside the front pocket, Marcus said. Heather crossed her arms. I already explained that passengers cannot self-administer unknown substances during boarding. A woman seated across the aisle looked up sharply. She had short brown hair, wire-framed glasses, and a hospital identification badge clipped to her tote bag. That is a rescue inhaler, she said. Heather turned toward her. Ma'am, please remain seated. My name is Emily Carter. I am a registered nurse. Separating a child with severe asthma from a prescribed rescue inhaler is not a reasonable safety step. Paul hesitated. The confidence in the crew's position weakened for the first time. Emily continued, The label is visible from here. His name is printed on it. Heather stepped between Emily and the cart. This is a crew matter. It became a medical matter when you removed emergency medication from a child, Emily replied. Marcus watched the exchange carefully. He did not need outrage. He needed witnesses, names, and facts. Paul reached for the pouch, but Heather kept one hand on the cart. We should keep it secured until the captain decides. Marcus's voice lowered. No captain needs to decide whether my son can keep medication prescribed to help him breathe. Paul looked toward the open cabin door, aware that nearby passengers were listening now. Mr. Reed, if this continues, we may need to ask you and your son to leave the aircraft. Jordan's face changed. Dad, are we in trouble? Marcus turned toward him immediately. No, you did nothing wrong. Then he faced Paul again. You are threatening to remove a black child from a flight because he carries a legal inhaler. Paul's jaw tightened. I am asking for cooperation. Cooperation is not surrendering my son's safety. Emily rose slowly from her seat. Return the inhaler. Review the documents, and this ends. Heather looked at her, then at Marcus, then at the growing number of passengers watching from behind. No, she said. This ends when they follow instructions. Marcus entered another line into his phone. Then he looked up with a stillness that made Paul stop speaking. Keep talking, Marcus said. Every word is making the truth easier to prove. Paul looked at Marcus's phone, then toward the passengers now watching from both sides of the aisle. What had begun as a quiet dispute was becoming something the crew could no longer control with rehearsed language. Heather pulled the service cart closer to the galley, placing another few feet between Jordan and the medication pouch. This cabin cannot continue boarding while he refuses instructions, she said. Marcus kept one hand on Jordan's shoulder. He has followed every instruction. You are the person refusing to read the evidence. Paul finally opened the pouch and removed the folded physician's letter. His eyes moved across the first line, then slowed. Jordan Reed, severe persistent asthma. Rescue inhaler must remain immediately accessible at all times. Paul read the sentence again. Emily watched from across the aisle. That letter is clear, she said. Heather barely glanced at it. Letters can be printed anywhere. Marcus looked at her. You accepted the possibility that it was false before you even opened it. Heather's lips tightened. I am responsible for security. Security requires judgment, Marcus replied. Not suspicion without evidence. Paul examined the prescription label next. Jordan's full name, medication, dosage, prescribing physician, and pharmacy information were visible in black print. Nothing was hidden. Nothing was unclear. Yet instead of returning the pouch, Paul lowered his voice. Mr. Reed, we may still need approval from the captain. Emily shook her head. You do not need cockpit approval to return prescribed medication to the patient whose name is printed on it. Heather stepped forward. You are interfering with crew duties. Emily met her gaze. I am preventing a preventable medical emergency. Jordan shifted in his seat. His breathing was still steady, but faster now. Marcus noticed him pressing his palm against the center of his chest. Jordan, tell me what you feel. The boy swallowed. It is getting a little tight. Marcus immediately knelt beside the seat so they were eye level. Can you speak normally? Yes. Any dizziness? No. Emily moved closer, careful and calm. Jordan, breathe in slowly through your nose and out through your mouth. Do not force it. Heather raised a hand. She cannot examine him without permission. Marcus turned his head. She has my permission. You do not have permission to keep his medication. The sharpness in his voice lasted only a moment, but it exposed the fear beneath his control. Paul looked at Jordan, then at the pouch in his hand. His certainty was fading. Heather's was not. He was fine before this became a scene, she said. The cabin reacted at once. Susan Mitchell, a passenger near the window, stared at her in disbelief. You created the scene, she said. A man behind Marcus added. The child asked for his own medication. That should have ended it. Heather looked around as if the witnesses themselves were the problem. Everyone needs to remain out of this. Marcus rose slowly. No. You wanted authority without witnesses. Now you have both. He took a photograph of the prescription label while Paul still held the pouch, then documented the physician's letter and the time. Paul did not stop him. Emily watched Jordan's breathing and spoke quietly. He should use the inhaler now, before anxiety makes the tightness worse. Marcus extended his hand. Return it. Paul hesitated. Heather reached toward the pouch. I said it stays secured. Paul pulled it slightly away from her. Caught between policy he could not name and facts he could no longer ignore. Marcus's phone vibrated. A message appeared from an executive contact he had alerted moments earlier. He read it once, then locked the screen. You have 30 seconds, he said. Heather gave a cold smile. Or what? Marcus looked at his son, then back at her. Or the people who designed this airline's medical safety system will learn exactly how you ignored it. The 30 seconds passed in a silence so complete that Jordan's breathing became the only sound Marcus could hear. Paul looked from the physician's letter to the inhaler, then finally placed the pouch into Marcus's outstretched hand. Give it to him, he said. Heather turned sharply. Paul, we have not completed the review. The review is complete enough, he replied. Marcus opened the pouch, removed the inhaler and spacer, and handed them to Jordan with steady hands. Emily remained beside the aisle, watching closely without crowding him. Slow breath in, she said. Hold for a moment, then breathe out. Jordan followed the instructions. The first breath was shallow. The second came easier. By the third, the tightness in his shoulders began to release. Marcus stayed at eye level with him, counting quietly, making sure his son never saw the anger building behind his calm. Heather stood near the galley with her arms folded, her expression unchanged. This entire situation could have been avoided if he had disclosed the device before boarding, she said. Marcus looked up slowly. He used the same inhaler at security. It was inspected. It was labeled. He carried documentation. You did not ask what had already been verified because you had already decided what you believed. Heather opened her mouth, but Emily spoke first. The child was managing his condition appropriately. The danger began when you separated him from the medication. Susan Mitchell nodded from the window seat. And when you ignored everyone who told you that. Paul looked toward the cabin door. Boarding had stopped. A gate agent stood just outside, speaking into a radio while several passengers waited in the jet bridge. The delay was no longer invisible. Marcus's phone vibrated again. This time the message came from Dana Lewis, Chief Compliance Officer for North Star Airlines. Confirmed. Medical safety escalation initiated. Preserve all documents. Station manager en route. Marcus read it, then placed the phone on the armrest where the message remained visible. Paul noticed the sender's title. His face changed. "You contacted corporate compliance?" he asked. "I contacted the person responsible for ensuring your airline follows the medical protocols it advertises." Heather gave a short, skeptical laugh. "You just happen to know the chief compliance officer?" Marcus stood. "I know the people who licensed the emergency medication system used across this fleet." Paul's eyes moved toward the inhaler in Jordan's hand. Emily looked at Marcus more carefully now. "What company?" she asked. Marcus did not answer immediately. He checked Jordan's breathing first. The boy nodded. "It is better." Only then did Marcus turn back toward the crew. "Reed Aviation Health Systems." Paul repeated the name under his breath. Recognition reached him slowly. The company's logo appeared on training manuals, emergency kits, and the medical response application used by every North Star crew. Heather's posture stiffened, but she still resisted the meaning. "That does not give you authority over this flight." "No," Marcus said. "Being his father gives me the responsibility to protect him. Knowing the system gives me the ability to prove exactly how you failed to use it." The gate agent entered the cabin, followed by a woman in a navy blazer carrying a company identification badge. She introduced herself as Angela Price, the station manager. Her eyes went first to Jordan, then to the medication pouch, then to Heather. "Corporate compliance has placed this departure on medical review," she said. "No one leaves the gate until I understand why a child's prescribed rescue inhaler was removed from his possession." Heather's confidence finally cracked. "I was following safety procedure." Angela looked at the physician's letter in Paul's hand. "Then show me the procedure." No one spoke. Marcus placed his hand gently on Jordan's shoulder. The truth had entered the cabin now, not loudly, but with names, timestamps, witnesses, and a system Heather could no longer hide behind. Angela waited, but Heather did not produce a policy. Paul lowered the physician's letter, and the silence around him felt heavier than any admission. Jordan remained seated with the inhaler resting in his lap, his breathing steadier now, though his eyes stayed fixed on the adults surrounding him. Marcus noticed the way his son kept glancing toward the medication pouch, as if someone might take it again. That small fear reached deeper than Heather's words. It pulled Marcus back 4 years, to a winter night in Baltimore when Jordan had been 7. A substitute teacher had locked his inhaler inside the nurse's office after deciding he was asking for it too often. By the time the school called Marcus, Jordan was in an ambulance, frightened and struggling to finish a sentence. Marcus had sat beside him in the emergency room for 6 hours, listening to machines measure every breath his son should never have had to fight for. That night became the reason Reed Aviation Health Systems created a simple rule for every partner airline. Rescue medication remains with the passenger unless a licensed medical professional determines otherwise. No assumptions. No unnecessary delay. No employee discretion based on appearance. Now Heather stood inside an aircraft using the very system built from that memory, and she had ignored its most basic protection. Angela stepped closer to the service cart. "Mr. Mercer, did either of you open the medical response application before taking the inhaler?" Paul looked down. "No." "Did you contact the ground medical desk?" "No." "Did you verify the prescription before restricting access?" His answer came quietly. Not before Heather moved the pouch. Angela turned toward Heather. "Why?" Heather's eyes moved across the cabin, searching for a version of the story that still protected her. The device looked suspicious, and the father became confrontational. Emily Carter shook her head. "He became protective after you took his child's medication." Susan Mitchell added, "He never threatened anyone. He asked you to read the label." Another passenger raised his hand. "I heard the boy explain what it was before she touched it." Heather's face tightened. "You are all seeing this after the fact." Marcus stood beside Jordan, one hand resting on the seatback. "No, they are describing the facts you ignored." Angela opened the medical response application on her tablet and entered the medication type. A green notice appeared immediately. "Passenger retained rescue inhaler. Do not separate from prescribed user." Verify label only if concern exists. Heather stared at the screen. The rule had been there the entire time. She had not misunderstood it. She had chosen not to look. Jordan's voice entered the silence. Why did you think I was lying? The question was soft, but no one in the cabin could escape it. Heather looked at him for the first time without authority between them. I did not say you were lying. Jordan's fingers closed around the inhaler. You said people bring things and pretend they are medical. Marcus felt the anger rise again, but he kept his voice measured. Answer him. Heather looked toward Angela instead. I made a judgment call. Marcus nodded once. That is the truth. You looked at a black boy in a hoodie holding prescribed medication, and your judgment arrived before the evidence. Paul closed his eyes briefly. Angela tapped her tablet, preserving the application result and opening a formal incident report. Heather Collins, you are relieved from this flight pending investigation. Mr. Mercer, you will remain available for a separate review of your response. Heather's face lost its color. You cannot remove me based on one complaint. Angela looked toward the rows of witnesses. This is not one complaint. This is a documented medical safety failure supported by passengers, a registered nurse, prescription records, and your own failure to follow written procedure. Marcus looked down at Jordan. How is your breathing? Better, the boy said. Then he looked at Heather again. But I want to keep it with me. Marcus placed the pouch securely in Jordan's backpack pocket. You will. Angela's tablet sounded with an incoming call from corporate compliance. She answered, listened, then turned toward Marcus with a recognition that had not been there before. Mr. Reed, she said carefully, the chief compliance officer has confirmed your identity and requested that you lead the technical review. Heather looked from Angela to Marcus, confused. Marcus did not smile. The moment was not about victory. It was about the truth finally reaching the people responsible for hearing it. Angela held the tablet between them while the corporate call remained active. Heather's confusion deepened, but Marcus did not rush to explain. He checked Jordan first, watching the rise and fall of his chest, making sure each breath came without strain. Only when Jordan gave him a small nod did Marcus turn back toward the adults surrounding them. The technical review begins with one question, he said. Why did a clearly labeled rescue inhaler leave the hands of the child who needed it? Paul looked at the floor. Heather answered with less confidence than before. I believed I was protecting the cabin. Marcus's expression did not change. Protection without evidence becomes harm. Angela placed the call on speaker. Dana Lewis's voice came through, precise and controlled. Mr. Reed, the incident record is active. We have preserved the boarding timeline, crew communications, and medical application logs. Heather looked at the tablet. Why is he leading anything? Dana paused. Because Marcus Reed founded Reed Aviation Health Systems, the company that designed the passenger medication protocol used by North Star Airlines. The cabin became still again. Emily looked from the inhaler to Marcus, understanding the connection. Paul's face tightened with recognition. Heather stared at him as though the plain gray sweater and dark jeans had concealed something she believed should have been visible. Marcus met her eyes. You discarded access to medication protected by a system my company created for children like my son. Heather opened her mouth, but Marcus continued. That is not the most important truth. He placed one hand on Jordan's seat. You should not have needed to know who I was. You should not have needed a company name, a contract, or an executive call. The label was enough. The physician's letter was enough. His words were enough. Jordan sat quietly, listening. He was still young enough to want the adults around him to be fair, but old enough to recognize when they were not. Angela looked toward Heather. You are required to leave the aircraft and report to station operations. Heather's voice dropped. I did not know his father was connected to the medical program. Marcus looked at her steadily. That sentence proves the problem. You are apologizing for choosing the wrong family, not for making the wrong choice. Susan Mitchell nodded from her seat. Emily folded her arms, her hospital badge catching the overhead light. Paul finally spoke. He is right. Heather turned toward him. Paul, we had the paperwork. We had the label. We had a nurse telling us what the risk was. I still delayed returning it. Angela documented his statement. Your cooperation will be included in the review. Paul looked toward Jordan. I am sorry. Jordan did not answer immediately. Then he said, you should listen faster next time. The simplicity of it reached everyone. Marcus's expression softened for the first time. That is exactly right. Dana's voice returned through the speaker. Mr. Reed, Corporate Medical Safety is requesting an immediate fleet-wide reminder that rescue medication remains with the prescribed passenger. Marcus nodded. Send it now. Add a requirement that any dispute involving a child's emergency medication must be escalated to ground medical support before access is restricted. Angela entered the instruction. Within seconds, a notification appeared on crew tablets across the aircraft. Heather watched the message arrive on Paul's device. The rule written clearly in language she could no longer reinterpret. Marcus looked around the cabin. This review is not about punishing uncertainty, he said. It is about stopping bias from pretending to be caution. Then he turned to Jordan. Do you still want to take this flight? Jordan considered the question, holding the inhaler securely in his hand. Yes, he said, but I want it where I can reach it. Marcus placed the pouch in the seat pocket directly in front of him. That is where it stays. Heather remained near the open cabin door, but the authority had already moved past her. Angela waited for a member of station operations to escort her from the aircraft, while Paul stood beside the galley with the weight of his own choices visible in his face. Jordan kept the inhaler in the seat pocket directly in front of him, close enough to touch without asking anyone. Marcus watched his son test that distance once, then settle back against the seat. The gesture was small, but it carried the memory of every moment when Jordan had been forced to depend on adults who did not listen. Dana Lewis remained on speaker through Angela's tablet. The fleet-wide medical notice has been issued, she said. Every active crew device has received it. Paul's tablet sounded almost immediately. He looked down and read the message aloud, his voice quiet. Prescribed rescue medication must remain with the passenger. Any concern must be verified without restricting access unless directed by licensed medical personnel. Emily Carter nodded. That should have been the first step. Marcus looked toward Heather. It was always the first step. The failure was not the absence of a rule. It was the decision to ignore it. Heather's expression tightened. You are making this about race when I was trying to do my job. The cabin shifted at those words. Susan Mitchell turned fully toward her. You questioned the boy before you checked the label. You questioned his father before you read the letter. What exactly are we supposed to call that? Heather looked toward Angela for support, but none came. Marcus stayed beside Jordan's seat. Bias does not always announce itself, he said. Sometimes it arrives as suspicion that feels reasonable only to the person carrying it. Heather crossed her arms. I treat every passenger the same. Jordan looked at her with a calmness that seemed older than 11. Then why did you not believe me? No one answered for her. The question remained in the air, simple and complete. Marcus felt something inside him shift. He had spent years designing systems because systems could be audited, corrected, and improved. But his son had reduced the entire failure to one sentence. Why did you not believe me? Angela stepped forward. Heather Collins, your removal from this flight is effective immediately. You will report to Employee Relations and Medical Safety Review before returning to duty. Heather looked at Marcus. Is that what you wanted? What I wanted, he replied, was for my son to take his medication without being treated like a threat. A station supervisor appeared at the cabin door. Heather gathered her personal items from the galley, moving carefully under the eyes of the passengers. As she passed Jordan's row, she stopped. I am sorry this became upsetting. Marcus's expression hardened. Do not apologize for the discomfort. Apologize for the choice. Heather glanced at Jordan. I am sorry I took your inhaler without listening. Jordan held her gaze. Do not do it to another kid. The words were not dramatic. They did not need to be. Heather lowered her eyes and left the aircraft. Paul watched the door close behind her, then turned toward Marcus. I should have stepped in sooner. Yes, Marcus said. You should have. Paul accepted the answer. No defense. No request for forgiveness. Angela reviewed the incident record one final time. Corporate is asking whether you want the flight canceled. Marcus looked at Jordan. What do you want? Jordan glanced out the window toward the runway, then back at the inhaler within reach. I still want to go to Chicago. Marcus nodded. Then the flight continues. Dana's voice came through the tablet. A replacement attendant is on the way. Departure will resume after the medical review is cleared. Marcus sat beside his son and closed the notes application on his phone. The record was complete, but the lesson was not. Around them, passengers returned slowly to their seats, carrying the discomfort of what they had witnessed. Jordan leaned toward his father. Did they listen because of your company? Marcus looked at him carefully. Some of them did. That is not fair. No, Marcus said. It is not. Then he placed his hand over the seat pocket where the inhaler rested. That is why the truth cannot end with who I am. It has to change what they do when the next child has no powerful name standing beside him. 24 minutes later, a replacement flight attendant named Laura Hayes entered the cabin with a calm expression and a tablet already open to the updated medical guidance. She greeted Jordan first, not because of who his father was, but because he was the passenger whose safety had been placed at risk. Your inhaler stays with you for the entire flight, she said. If you need anything, you tell me directly. Jordan nodded and touched the seat pocket as if confirming the promise. Marcus watched without comment. Respect did not need applause. It needed consistency. Angela remained near the front galley while corporate compliance completed the departure review. Paul had been removed from lead duties for the flight and reassigned to a jump seat until another qualified crew member arrived. He did not argue. He had finally understood that regret did not erase delay. Emily returned to her seat across the aisle, but kept Jordan within view. Susan Mitchell lowered the window shade slightly to soften the afternoon glare. Around them, boarding resumed with a quieter rhythm. Passengers who had witnessed the incident no longer looked at Marcus with curiosity. They looked at Jordan with something closer to recognition. The child had not caused a disruption. He had exposed one. Angela approached Marcus with the completed incident report displayed on her tablet. Corporate medical safety has opened a formal investigation, she said. Heather will remain off duty until the review is complete. Paul's response will be evaluated separately. The cabin records, witness statements, and application logs have all been preserved. Marcus read the summary. What happens beyond this flight? Angela hesitated. That will depend on corporate leadership. Marcus looked toward Jordan. Then corporate leadership needs to hear from the person who was affected. Angela lowered the tablet. Jordan. Yes. Marcus turned to his son. Only if you want to. Jordan thought for a moment. Can I tell them that kids should not have to prove they are sick every time? Marcus felt the weight of the question. You can tell them exactly that. Dana Lewis's voice returned through Angela's device. We can arrange a meeting with the Medical Safety Board tomorrow. Marcus shook his head. Not only the Medical Safety Board. Include training, employee relations, legal and passenger accessibility. Dana paused. Understood. And the review cannot end with one employee, Marcus continued. Examine how the crew was trained to identify risk, how bias affects judgment, and why the written protocol was easier to ignore than a child standing in front of them. Angela nodded as she entered each instruction. Jordan leaned toward Marcus. Will they really change it? Marcus looked at him. They will if the change is measured. He turned back to Angela. Require scenario-based training. Real examples. Parent traveling alone. A child in a hoodie. A passenger who speaks quietly. Staff need to learn that fear and suspicion are not evidence. Dana replied through the speaker. We will issue a revised training order across the North Star network. Marcus's voice remained even. Do not name Jordan in the public materials. The boy looked surprised. Why not? Because the rule should protect every child, not only the one whose story people recognize. Laura began the pre-departure safety check. She stopped beside Jordan's row, confirmed that the medication pouch was secure but accessible, then moved on without treating it as unusual. That small act mattered more than any apology Heather could have offered. The cabin door closed. The final passenger count was confirmed. Angela stepped off the aircraft, leaving the investigation in motion behind her. As the jet bridge pulled away, Jordan looked through the window at the airport lights beginning to glow. "Dad," he said, "I was scared when she took it." Marcus placed his hand over Jordan's. "I know, but I said something." "You did." Jordan looked at the inhaler, then at his father. "Next time, I will say it louder." Marcus smiled gently. Next time, the adults should listen the first time. The aircraft began to move, but the real shift had already happened. A child had asked why he was not believed, and an entire company was now required to answer. The aircraft climbed through the evening sky, leaving Atlanta beneath a layer of fading gold. Jordan sat beside the window with his inhaler secured in the seat pocket, exactly where he could reach it. His breathing remained steady. Marcus watched him for several minutes before opening his tablet again, but the notes from his meeting no longer mattered. The screen showed a message from Dana Lewis confirming that the Medical Safety Board, Training Division, Employee Relations Team, Legal Department, and Passenger Accessibility Office would meet the next morning. Jordan's statement would be included in the review. Marcus read the message once, then closed the tablet. Across the aisle, Emily Carter looked over and gave Jordan a small smile. "You handled that well," she said. Jordan shrugged. "I was scared." Emily nodded. "Being brave does not mean you were not scared. It means you spoke anyway." Susan Mitchell leaned forward from the next row. "You made all of us pay attention." Jordan looked at his father. "Did I really?" Marcus answered before anyone else could. "Yes, you asked the question nobody in that cabin could avoid." Laura Hayes moved quietly through first class, checking passengers without treating Jordan's medication as unusual. When she reached his row, she asked whether he needed water, then continued serving the cabin with the same courtesy she offered everyone else. Marcus noticed that Jordan relaxed each time she passed without staring at the inhaler. Normal treatment had become its own kind of repair. 40 minutes into the flight, Dana called again through the secure messaging system. North Star Airlines had approved an immediate temporary directive across its domestic fleet. Rescue medication would remain with the prescribed passenger. Any concern would require verification through ground medical support without removing access. Crew members would complete mandatory scenario training before their next scheduled assignments. Marcus showed the message to Jordan. "This happened because you spoke," he said. Jordan read the notice slowly. "Will they believe the next kid?" "A policy cannot guarantee that," Marcus replied. "But it can make ignoring that child harder and accountability faster." Jordan looked out at the clouds. "I do not want another kid to feel like I did." Marcus rested his hand on the armrest between them. "Then that is what we build from this." The flight continued toward Chicago without further disruption. No one asked Jordan to explain his condition again. No one demanded that Marcus prove his authority. For the first time since boarding, they were simply a father and son traveling together. As the aircraft began its descent, the lights of Chicago appeared below, spreading across the darkness like a field of stars. Laura announced that the cabin should prepare for landing. Jordan secured the pouch but kept the inhaler within reach. Marcus watched him follow every instruction with the quiet confidence that had returned to his face. Before the wheels touched down, Jordan asked one final question. "Dad, why did they listen after they learned who you were?" Marcus looked at his son, knowing that the answer had to be honest. "Because some people respect power before they respect humanity." Jordan frowned. "That is wrong." "It is," Marcus said. "Our job is to make sure the system does not reward it." The aircraft landed smoothly and rolled toward the gate. Passengers began gathering their belongings, but several paused beside Jordan's row to thank him for speaking up. Emily handed Marcus her business card in case the review needed an independent medical statement. Susan told Jordan that his question would stay with her. When the cabin door opened, Marcus and Jordan did not rush. They waited until the aisle cleared, then stood together. Jordan placed the medication pouch inside the front pocket of his backpack, where he could reach it without permission. Marcus looked toward the galley, remembering how quickly fear had been created there and how carefully truth had dismantled it. He had not used his position to demand special treatment. He had used it to make equal treatment harder to deny. As father and son stepped into the terminal, Jordan walked a little taller. Behind them, North Star Airlines had already begun rewriting its training. Ahead of them, the lesson remained simple enough for any child to understand. Medication protects breathing. Policy should protect people. And dignity should never depend on a powerful father revealing his name.